Welcome to the REI Hacker Podcast, where we unlock the secrets of real estate success. Join us as we dive into the journeys of top investors, mentors, and industry experts. Learn from their experiences and navigate the highs and lows of the investing world. And now, let's hand it off to our host, Benson Juarez.
Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate you coming to listen to this edition of the REI Hacker Podcast. Today's guest is Dave Kohl. Dave is the CEO of First in Real Estate Marketing. Dave combines his early radio broadcasting experience with 30 years of real estate experience to provide marketing and technology services for real estate investors, developers, and brokers. Dave, sir, thank you so much. Good to see you again. How are things going? Thanks for being with us.
Oh, my pleasure, Benson. Great. Always great to talk with you, and hopefully we can bring some good insights to our collective audience, because, there's certainly a lot going on right now.
There is. Business is moving so quickly, and there's so many different strategies that people are implementing in their businesses, from, lead generation to marketing. And you've got a really interesting background. You've literally been in the business for over 30 years, started in the early 90s. Like, tell me first a little bit about where you come from, but also too, like, where have you seen the most change? Like, you've seen so much happen. What are your insights on how the business has developed over the last 30 years?
All right. Yeah, a lot to recap, but I'll try to recap 30 years in like 2 minutes here. So this actually, getting involved with real estate started by accident. And so I initially went to college and majored in broadcast communications, was working for radio stations, doing news and sports reporting. And the first, I'll say, quote unquote, accident was I just happened to have had a couple of buddies that both worked for a small manufacturing plant, and they had the opportunity to do a bidding presentation to a larger manufacturer to get them to buy their parts on a regular basis. And so what they did was they hired me to do their presentation, because in radio broadcasting, if a report is supposed to be 45 seconds, it's got to be 45 seconds. If it's supposed to air at 2:17 p.m., it airs at 2:17 p.m. So this is the discipline that I was brought up with and trained on. So those guys figured, hey, let's get a pro to go in there and do their presentation. So I had to learn about different types of springs and all kinds of, things that was not exactly in my playbook. And so we went to the presentation. It turns out that the people before were still in the process of leaving. And as they're packing up, I see their presentation materials, and I'm like, whoa, tough act to follow here. But I went in, did my thing. We had 3 minutes to present, time for questions, went in, did it, said, hey, guys, I did the best I could. Well, turned out we got the bid. And so the one guy, in saying, hey, thank you, but why did you select us? And the guy said, plain and simple, your presentation. So the light bulb went on that instead of working in radio, maybe I could make some money doing this. The other accident that happened dealt with a company bringing us a use of technology for real estate. And it was a long story, but the reason that got turned down was not because of the technology, but because of the cost. And I had access to other technology that was more cost effective and just went with it. So to condense, the first few years. But now, having said that, Benson, to your question, I'll tell you what's changed. When I started, it was just a couple of years before the internet started to come around and really take hold. So at that time, it was things like, one of the first things I was working on was a recorded telephone announcement service. If you remember the phone hotlines where you drive by, see a house and the phone number and the code number. So that's what I was working on. And I was working more with agents and brokers, because the copy at that time was being written for the newspaper, for the MLS, for a magazine, for a flyer, and not for an audio description.
Mm.
So it's like you fast forward 30 years from now, and now I'm working on all these things, whether it's for online. I work with a tech team that does, creates virtual reality 360s for proposed properties. And so I'm kind of doing the same thing, but now with all the technology. So what has changed is that, yeah, now there's all this technology and the apps and all these things. And so while the technology and the apps and the online services are great for finding properties and finding comps, and obviously that service is why we're on the call, but
Hmm.
it's also that people, by using those apps, it's great for finding properties, but then the what do you do with them when you find them? How do you know it's a good deal? Benson, that's where the change is. I'm finding
Mm.
too many, and to me, too many investors, especially newer ones, over rely on the technology that's out there. So, as an investor myself, primarily passive, I've got a 401k that I converted to a self-directed IRA. So, what I do is passive. But in working with newer investors and students, what I preach is about researching the properties and sometimes researching the people selling them, who's
Mm.
buying them, what's going on, getting inside those properties as much as you can. It's if I'm going to talk to a broker about a property, quite honestly, I want to know more about that property than the broker does and be asking him or her more to verify, does he or she know what they're talking about? Are they validating my findings as opposed to, hey, what do you recommend? And this is the thing. And it also, Benson, it comes up with even with privy, that in talking about that, that it's kind of the idea of some investors, oh, yeah, I've got a guy, he sends me all these deals. And I'm like, well, the guy sending you these deals, wouldn't he or she want them for themselves? So you're getting somebody else's rejects. The challenge is to find the deals on your own and then be able to validate them.
Well, not necessarily. I mean, I think that there people kind of figure out where they fit in the ecosystem, and a lot of people who do lead gen don't have the resources to take the deals down themselves. Um, that's just kind of normal, right? Which is why the whole wholesaling world even exists. Um, so yeah, maybe they could take them down. Maybe they're rejects, maybe they're not. But every property is a deal at the right price, right? That's what we
Right.
know. So, if you can negotiate a better deal on a lead, that maybe was somebody else's rejects, then that's fine because maybe it turned into like a okay deal into an amazing deal because you got a better price and you have better negotiation skills, better sales skills, and and also too, there's all these different exit strategies, right? A property may be a horrible wholesale or a fix and flip because there's not enough margin, but it might be a great rental property. And maybe you can buy that property creatively, leave the existing mortgage in place, and it's at 2.8%, and you can cash flow a bunch of money on that thing. Like that could be an amazing deal too. So it really depends on the exit strategy, the price, what are the terms on that deal, from a mortgage perspective, and can it cash flow, right?
Yes, exactly. Because sometimes I think the art of it, the strategy should be to find a good deal and then run the numbers. So you see you can get a property in for, 65% of the ARV, and know that you can handle the repairs that need to be done and still make your percentage on it. And so that's what you're looking to find, and then maybe run the numbers. Am I better off to flip this? And I've had that happen of you're thinking, oh, maybe I can flip this, and then wait a minute, you look at the monthly expenses, and as I was talking earlier about doing your research, and go, hey, wait a minute, looking at rents in the area, this may be a better rental property,
Yeah.
and doing those comparisons. And I think that that's a kind of a, newer investor early mistake, but there are some seasoned investors that will do that they're just so determined to flip a property, they may be missing out on a better opportunity for the long term. And even with partnering, because as you know, Benson, with newer investors that, when you don't have all the funds you would like, there's always that, oh man, that's another $100,000. I don't have the funds to get that property. That would be great. So it's kind of knowing who you can partner with and bring it to the table. And so
Mhm.
there are investors that, they're not exploring the market that you're in, or they're waiting for somebody with credibility to bring them that good deal so they could partner. Or, I may say, hey, Benson, if I go half of the down payment with you, what can we do? Here's this great deal, or just kind of establish those kinds of relationships to get started. And
Yep.
then as you're going through the transaction process with them, now you're learning. So maybe the next time you find that good deal, you can engineer more of it yourself and keep, kind of growing that way. And so those are things that, I think we're finally starting to see, just based on the economic conditions, is more of that strategy, that partnering that wasn't there, 30 years ago, 20 years ago, without access to all of the information we have. It was more,
Mhm.
yeah, yeah, Mr. Other Buyer, boy, I don't know. I don't know about this one. And then I'd go buy it for myself. And now I think we're seeing the advantages of partnering. And it's things like some of the states lowering the costs for LLC or LLCs, and you can
Mhm.
do an umbrella LLC. So it's like, okay, hey, I'm going to partner with Benson on this property, and then I'm going to partner with Joe on another one. We form a
Yeah.
different LLC, and just so that I think, combined is just the kind of the methodology of vetting these properties combined with the new opportunities for partnering and doing the networking and those kinds of things.
Yeah, for sure. There's so many different ways to make money in this. I partner up with Pace Morby, and he's got all these verticals that he's creating within his community because he figured out that there are so many other ways that people can bring value to the table that isn't what you would typically find that's valuable. Like, before it was like sales skills, the lead, the cash, the person was the cash, the person was the expertise to do a flip. Those are like the main ones you think about. And then people started to figure out, okay, well, there's another one for people who can hustle. Maybe I got extra time so I can knock on doors. I got extra time so I can, you know, cold call. Right. So that now is another extra layer. And then Pace has found some ways where he created this whole thing called top tier TC, transaction coordination. So there's these people that are not good at sales, don't have money, don't have a whole lot to bring to the table, except for they're very meticulous. So they're good at coordinating transactions. And he created a whole persona around that in training. And then he created this other thing called the Gator community, which is people who have a little bit of cash, not enough cash necessarily to take a whole deal down and do the whole thing, but maybe they could lend, gap funding, or they can do earnest money deposits, right? So it's like there's
Mhm.
all these little ways for people to get involved in a transaction now that was completely not typical back in the day. And that's just the evolution of the business. And, we're seeing all these things come in. I mean, with AI, man, like there's so many ways now that you can leverage artificial intelligence to have a conversation with somebody through chat. Or we just were introduced to a product called Prop AI that we're all kind of participating in, that is conversational artificial intelligence. And this computer, you know, artificial intelligence bot called Jen will have a voice conversation with somebody, and it'll go back and forth, and it can negotiate and set up appointments and empathize. Like, I can only imagine what you've seen in your 30 years back from these phone services to now conversational artificial intelligence. Like, is that just like blowing your mind?
Yeah, it does. In fact, it's funny how obviously you never argue with a client, but one of my favorite stories is to show you how far back I go. I had done some, additional work with kind of, marketing and writing for um, the older lady agent who knew everything types. And she was like arguing with me, well, why should I spend money to post this listing online? I don't know anybody that has a computer. So that's how far back I go. And so, to your point with seeing this, but as I was kind of saying earlier, yes, the technology is good, but it's also to not forget the human angle.
Right.
And it's the kind of thing where, one, two or three people could come at me with the same AI, artificial intelligence information. So I'm kind of that, be that one that has the unique information so that it's me and makes me want to deal with you. So for example, it's a story that initially I would talk with about when I do marketing or doing work just for agents and brokers. And that's now there's an element of this for investors. And so a broker I worked with years ago, we actually kind of taught and learned from each other. So, because I talk about tracking things, and even if it's an Excel spreadsheet or, a pad of paper and a pen or little sheets with different colors so you can categorize, or if you've got a CRM, whatever you're using to track, is keep track of when you're focused in on a market. Yeah, you're looking for good deals, but what's on the MLS? What's selling? What are the amenities? And then
Mm-hmm.
it's things like keeping a spreadsheet, days on the market, things about the house, go to estate sales, garage sales, open houses, know everything you can about every house in that neighborhood because that's how you find a good deal. So if hey, I can get $325,000 for a house like that, and you uncover one that you can get for 250 with some repairs and have a margin, now and you've got the research to prove that. But anyway, with
Right.
this agent, the idea of what he was doing and what I now preach is, besides days on the market and all these little facts, keep track of the agent and affiliation, the office that listed it, and keep track of the original list price versus what they sold it for. So in the case of this agent, he got tired of agents taking property listings just to get the listing. And he actually, from his tracking over the course of months, found an agent and had talked to her. And she was with a competing office, which, used to matter more than it does now. And she would talk about how she would walk away if they weren't priced right and didn't have certain amenities that she knew she could
Mm.
sell. And so this guy that I was working with realized that, and that she was listing only those properties that, met her qualifications. He was working with buyers and he brought her 3 deals within 1 year upon finding that out. So we took it a
Nice.
step further, and it's things like, okay, if you're a buyer and you track over days, weeks, months, and even years, now you're going to notice some agents that, hey, they keep getting 85 to 90% of list price or the original asking price for their transactions. So if you know that, you're not going to find that in the MLS or on any service. So if you know that and you're looking to buy, as they say in Ghostbusters, who are you going to call? So you know these things about the agents,
Yep.
but they couldn't possibly know that you know that. So it's
Right.
things like that, who's doing what, and also maybe you can see from tracking investment properties in the area, as kind of a backup, which agents are working with investors. So that's one method. Another good friend of mine that it's an investor. In fact, now he's in his 70s, so he's been investing. I've known him almost 40 years, and he's been investing the whole time. He's fortunate to own a co-op, which is kind of in between an apartment and a condo, but he owns it in Manhattan. And so
Mm.
right now, he's not looking to buy or sell anymore. He's kind of keeping what he's got. But what he does when he's in town is he will look for open houses in the area and go to any he can make that are similar to his place. So he will go say, hey, I'm an investor in this area. I own the place at such and such. I want to see how this compares. What are you asking? He will talk to the agents. So in the meantime, from doing this over the years, now he's seeing where his property is. Hey, I better fix up such and such. that kind of thing to keep his property on top. And during
Yeah.
the times he's been looking, he's got people he can call. Hey, remember that property on 3rd Street? Yeah, I know that's sold, but I'm looking for something like that priced here. If you hear of anything, let me know. So it's a way to develop his network.
Yeah.
For the
Network, those
yeah,
conversations are really important.
right.
Being out
And
there in that ecosystem and letting people know what you do so that next
yeah,
time they're thinking about, oh yeah, this guy, like, he's looking for this, that they can call and touch base. But most people just
right.
aren't willing to put the work in to have those
Well,
conversations
that's
and do that long-term networking and business building.
right, and they're the ones that are maybe either struggling to get a good deal or they're in a bidding war, that type of thing. And this is what I mean by kind of being out ahead. Another story from contact I know, and this is aimed right at the investors. So a broker in the Midwest did some work for other clients, but in reality got his license so that he could handle his own investments. Oh, by the way, his brother's a general contractor. So you can see
Mhm.
where this is going. But what he would do, he and his brother actually bought a place that needed significant rehab, a multifamily in the Chicago area. And so as they were planning the rehab, what he did as a broker, he would look at the properties for sale, either go to an open house, but it was multifamily. So a lot of times it was on lockbox. He would bring his brother as the client, and they would go in through the lockbox, look at similar properties in the area. And this way they were able to compare, okay, what does this property have? What do we need in here to make it saleable? And as one example, from one of the times they did that, they saw a property similar, like a block away, that had one of those, in the wall sound systems where you go into the kitchen, you can play the music in the kitchen and
Sure.
that type of thing. And so they, for the few $100s, they went and ordered that as part of their rehab to be able to offer that like other places had, or if they didn't have it, it was one more amenity for them because this was the place that would go to more of a 20 something, 30 something type audience. So the
Got it.
point here is that, licensed to handle mostly their own transactions, but that's what they were doing with it and scouting
Yeah.
the property. And so those things made a difference. Yes, they were able to fix up and made a good buck on that property. So yeah, it is that going the extra mile. And
Yeah.
as
It makes
great
a
as it is, and I've
difference.
seen from like no information to all kinds of information, but it's what you do with it. And it's almost like now you've got to do the be a step ahead of that. And
Yep.
that has a lot of benefits.
Yep. Yeah, that's just the hustle factor, right? Putting in the extra work, paying attention to what's happening in that local market. And technology and data certainly makes that a lot easier. A platform like Privy, where you can see what other investors are buying, what they're buying them for, sales price, days on market. Like, you have all that in one place, and then the ability for them to run comps, analyze a property in anywhere across the United States has been a big game changer for a lot of our clients. From a marketing perspective, where have you seen some advances in technology enabling marketing to be more effective, and what have you seen in that change?
Yeah, I've seen a lot, and it's still with even the simple virtual staging.
Mm.
I know one of the uh, sources that I've been working with has where an investor, an agent, you can take a picture of the empty room and then they'll send it back appropriately furnished and with the design, things like that. But it's also that as far as things that I've seen, because I've been working with the tech team that does the virtual reality and what's called custom interactive virtual staging, actually going back to 2018 and the days when we would kind of rope off an area, put the headset on somebody, and they'd walk around like they're walking around inside the property and could see, the furniture, and we'd bring up a selection panel. They could change the wall colors, but the rest of the room maintains. So I'm seeing more of that where it's
That's cool.
customized technology. And so, for example, one that we did, and this is why I'm bringing this up, they did where you kind of like enter in a hallway, you go to the left, here's this room that looks, trash. The floors coming off and there's holes in the wall and this whole thing. Then you go across the hall to the right. Here's this amazing fixed up room with all the right furniture and the modern colors. It's the same room. The group that did that were doing a before and after. And
Oh,
it was the
that's
idea
the
that
VR
they
headset.
used. Pardon me?
That's with the VR headset.
Yeah, so you could see this and like you would walk or take a few steps, or they'd have like a tile on the floor. You click it and it advances you to the next room. And so their purpose with that was to show this is what we can do with a property. This is what we are looking for. And so when selling a property, they would, kind of make it look like here's what you can do with the rooms, to create the vision even as it was being rehabbed. And another primary use was to say, this is why you should invest with us. This is what we're going to do to market the property. So they were kind of using it for funding. And that's the thing about being able to be creative and have that something that somebody else does not. Not that only this technology or you have to spend to do it, but I mean, that's the kind of thinking that I've got. Another example, Benson, if I might, which is not geared to the technology, but I did some marketing work for a group that owned a couple of apartment buildings in the same area. They had bought, renovated, and turned around to a positive cash flow within 5 years. They found another building in the same area because with the right research tool, you can find these things, met their criteria. So they brought me in to finish their marketing plan that this is what we did with building A. This is what we did with building A. Here's what we project for this building. Here's the background of the company, which happened to have been the two head honchos. One was a property manager, the other ran a construction company. So they're the perfect people behind this. So at first we did okay for a lender type. Here's, the loans we've made good on. Here's our credit. Here's all this so that you should lend us the money to acquire this next property. They needed funding. Took that page out, and then I did okay, Mr. Investor, if you invest such and such, you get a percentage. Here's your expected rate of return within a 5-year period. Because they didn't care if they got a loan or took in a partner, they wanted to acquire that property. So to your earlier question, Benson, I just happened to think of that. Now there's a strategy. So it's kind of like they had proposal A and proposal B on their desk, depending on who asked. It was whoever
Right.
got to them first. And so, yes, that involves the kind of the technology and things to discover the property and the templates for the proposal and all that, but it's that element of now, hey, instead of just going for lenders or just going to investors, and it takes this, the right situation to do that. But that was something that they did to try to get the edge and get the funding so
Got
that
it.
somebody else did not beat them to that property because other people, investors, would have access to finding that property. So that's to kind of combine all these points. I think that's
Yeah.
probably the best example I've got for you.
Yeah, that's pretty good. I like the idea of doing the virtual reality. I've seen those images that you find in listings where they have one. It looks like it's perfectly furnished, and I can't tell the difference until you look at the
Mhm.
photo and the furniture disappears. You're like, oh my God, that was put in there virtually. And
Yeah.
it's amazing that
And
how good that technology is now. Like it's almost imperceivable with the naked eye. And it like fits perfectly with like, with distance, like so the back of the couch is smaller than the front, right? So there's depth to it and the different materials and it, depending upon where the lighting is in the room, like you've got the right shadows and the right um I guess you would say like the color
right.
based off of
And
where the
then,
light
yeah,
is. It's
the
really
guys I
cool.
work with, the guys I work with will take even from floor plans and architectural drawings and create that for proposed properties. So
Hmm.
this way it can be used in the design process. What color do you like the walls? What type of flooring? And then it's the idea of for pre-selling or pre-leasing. So you'll be driving down the street and there's just the wood frame for some new, houses going up, and you'll get that, 5% already sold, or we've sold 3, and this is a way that we can do that. So maybe they offer a little discount for pre-buying, but this can be used as a marketing tool, help in the design process. And to the example I gave a couple of minutes ago, it could be, hey, this is why you should invest with us. We're using this technology to help with marketing those properties.
Right. So are those the kinds of services you're providing to your clients? Is like you're kind of like consulting on the best ways of getting a particular property to sell? Is that mostly what you're doing, is working with
Yeah, it's I guess because I also do help with the strategies, business plans. I've been actually in the last couple of years working even on some more offering memorandums, case studies, property proposals, and that type of thing. So yes, it's also using the technology, and just in my experience, that it keeps me hopping. I may be talking with owners or investors or brokers, developers about the technology, and they'll go, oh, yeah, we could use a marketing plan or an additional feasibility study. Or I'll be talking with somebody about the feasibility study and preparing for the proposed property, and they'll go, yeah, we want to use the technology to help sell. So I'm kind of, it's as I call what I do, it's kind of creating opportunities for brokers, investors, and developers, whatever it takes to get them to the closing table, is kind of how I how I sum it all up.
So you're marketing on the back end of a deal, potentially, not necessarily for lead generation.
Right. Yeah, it's almost like, how to well, it's kind of a form of lead generation because you may be looking for sellers or buyers, but it's not the massive, hey, let's send out, 10,000 postcards and get three people we can work with. It's more of a kind of a custom thing, which
Mhm.
fits in with what I was saying before. People have access to the technology, but you want to be the one that's got the, hey, nobody else told me this, or I didn't know that, or the one that's kind of come up with that special thing that kind of makes you unique and
Mhm.
sometimes can even help you with partnering. I know we were talking about that a couple of minutes ago,
Yep.
but it was another example. I was talking and going, to investors meetings, networking events, and so forth. A guy that was recently retired firefighter in the Chicago area, and he's looking at retirement funds, but didn't at that time have the wherewithal to find deals. And I was like, hey, you're bringing something to the table. You're going to find deals by partnering, because he could go into older buildings and say, hey, I'm a fireman, hey, that's a fire code violation or a potential violation. Now, he knew it could be $50 worth of wire from Home Depot to fix it, but he would just point out how that could be a fire code violation to help get the price down or to
Mhm.
help in negotiations, which brought value to the money man who would have never thought of that and been forced to pay a higher price and might not have taken the deal.
Yeah.
So it's things like that. And that's where I kind of like to come in and kind of, I call it positioning, position
Mhm.
the people. And I'll go, okay, Mr. or Ms. potential client, what do you bring to the table? What's there from your experience? Even if you haven't invested, people, maybe they've worked in the banking industry, they've done accounting for a big business. There's things that they can kind of bring to the table. Or it's even, I've had where somebody was in the small town they grew up in and knew what every single house, and every building used to be and what was there. And that's valuable information to an investor that, barely even knows where the town is, to be
Right.
able to bring them a deal where you're coming in with the history. And that's what I look for, Benson, is that what's that, give me that, as they say, unique selling proposition. How can I place you into this particular situation?
Yep. Yeah, there's so many different angles out there, and like right now, like I'm doing some investing as well, and people are like, "Well, what's your lead generation?" And for me, the biggest lead generation tool that works is referrals, right? So like I get property sent to me all the time, and opportunities for private money lending, opportunities for, subject to deals or fix and flip or buy and hold. And I can't do everything that comes my direction, but it's way less expensive to do that than it is to go out and spend a bunch of money on, like you said, mailers or doing pay per click or, some of those other things that work. But, if I'm not looking to close 10 deals a month, referrals is great, right?
Yeah.
And getting those from people who are out there on the ground and needed some assistance just to kind of get the deal at the closing table.
Yeah, and some of it too, Benson, is to be letting those people know what your criteria is.
Your
It's
bylaws.
okay to say, you know what, I invest in anything between 300 and $400,000 in this zip code that has at least 3 bedrooms or
Yeah.
4 units or whatever you're looking for. The more specific you get, and by promoting a specialty,
Yeah.
sometimes people know it and they'll say, hey, you're really good at finding those 2 flats in whatever city. Do you think you could help me find one in another city? And you go, well, I don't know the market that well, but here are things to look for in that type of building. And it kind of maybe helps spread your expertise. So by having that something where they'll remember you, they'll come to you. It might even be as a consulting role. And as you get more seasoned and you've got money, you go, hey, that thing in another city. Yeah, let me take a look at that. Do they need partners? Somebody to, could I get 10% of that? That looks good. Or just ways to kind of, again, getting yourself into that situation where you're
Yeah.
bringing them something unique. Ideally, something not that they can't get it anywhere else, but they don't know who else to get it from. It's, I guess, a good way to put it.
Yeah. It's opportunistic, right? Like figuring out a way to, help the transaction. But it's deal flow, right? To get in front of as many
Yeah,
deals as possible. Um, so for your services, then the marketing, it's helping people to sell properties on the back end. That's some of the stuff you do, right? And it's consulting,
right.
and then using your 30 years of experience. I'm sure it puts you in front of quite a few deals, right?
Yeah,
Probably mostly
it
in the
does.
Chicago
And
area.
sometimes I do. I keep my eyes out for buyers too, where I
Mhm.
do have people that anywhere from newer investors on up to larger companies that will say, if you find such and such, let me know.
Yep.
And so it might even be some type of finder's fee or referral fee. Or I even had a situation with, this was a larger mixed use commercial, but I had a situation where I was put in touch with a commercial developer, had, I guess, a potential JV partner that something went wrong at their end, not related to the property, that backed out. These people needed funding. They were put in touch with me to help them find a funding source so they could get this project pushed through. And so the reason that, that I wanted to see this go through was they were going to use a lot of the technology that I had to offer. So I stood the gain. Oh, by the way, the reason I was put in contact with these guys in the first place, the architect who was chomping at the bit to get going is the one that put me in touch with them, knowing that if I got this going, I'd get work, he would get work, and they would get their project done. So these things happen. They don't happen overnight, people.
Yeah.
It's having the contact. Somebody said, hey, I wonder if Dave can help me get this financed, and then pointed out the benefit that we would all get the work for doing that. So
Yeah.
these are things that just happen with networking and staying in touch, where it's not constantly hounding people, but staying in touch with, legitimate opportunities. So as I say, and I point out, especially when working with agents, whether they're just investors with their license, is don't make a lot of the agent mistakes out there of things like, for example, with me, my wife and I had moved into a townhouse years ago. And exactly like a month or 4 or 5 weeks after we moved into a new townhouse, I get a postcard from the agent that handled it saying now is the time to sell. So it's kind of like, you got your database, know who you're going to contact for what reason. So this way you should have it in your notes, in your files. Hey, if I find a property with this, I need a partner, I'm calling this guy and that lady. So it's
Nice.
also the kinds of things I help people with, but that's what you need to know, because to your point, Benson, if you're getting, lists of properties that are twice your price range or nowhere near what you're looking for, there comes a time when you're going to go, oh, this guy, and not even open the email.
Yep.
But if you're getting it from somebody that, hey, you've done 3 deals with, when they send it to you, it's something right up your alley. you're going to open it. So, and these are things that I help with, even with segmenting the database. And don't be sending out, Happy Father's Day cards to everybody that's a guy, because they don't all have kids. And just doing all these things to say, okay, does this person buy? Does this group buy? So you know who you're sending to. And even on social media, what you're posting. Post about the type of properties you work with, or the
Right.
market that you're doing. So that's the kinds of things where I've done some, I guess you can say, consulting type work of doing that. And because of my broadcasting and presentation experience, I've also worked with, I guess we'll say, students, agents, and investors, with even like the personal speaking coaching, or you've got this great deal, here's how to present it, both from the print side to make it have the right information in there to make it appealing, but then from the presentation side, it's not public speaking coaching of going la 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 into a microphone. It's getting your bullet points, making sure you're getting the points out there about a property that makes it, distinct. And
Mm.
it's kind of along the lines of, investors. I was saying earlier that, Dave, I found this great deal. Let me send you a picture. It's like, I don't care what it looks like. Tell me how I can make money off it.
Right.
And so I, kind of helping with that as well, which is nice. And I'm actually looking to do more of that, just so that it's less dependent on rates going up in some of these
Oh,
different
yeah.
markets.
Very cool. Well, for those people listening right now, if you think that Dave could be valuable for your business in the marketing functions, the consulting functions, he's in the Chicago market. Dave, if someone wants to work with you or find you, how can they find you?
Well, they can start with firstin.com, FIRSTIN.com, like we're first in marketing, first in line. And
Mhm.
that's I would have to say the best way. Or I'm on LinkedIn and whatever we're calling Twitter these days. So some feeds and comments on there. So welcome to connect with me on there. I do like to connect. And even with LinkedIn, I do not do LinkedIn Premium, because I want everybody to be able to contact me and not just huge executives. So I do like to be contacted, and I actually like to work with connections, and I'll message them. How can I help you? How can we work
Right.
together? And I've had that happen where it's led to something where they're not trying to sell me, I'm not trying to sell them. It's how can we both get checks from other sources or work to get a deal done. So I do like to do that. So those are the best ways.
Amazing. Well, Dave, thank you so much for taking the time to share your experience with us. And it sounds like you've got just a wealth of knowledge in all things marketing and the technology aspect as well, and the consulting. For those of you that are watching this right now, thank you so much for listening to this edition of the REI Hacker Podcast. Keep an eye out for more episodes of engaging individuals who have experience in real estate investing and marketing, and other service providers and influencers and mentors and coaches in the real estate investing and entrepreneurial spaces. So thanks again for listening, and we'll see you on the next podcast. Take care.